All right, we're gonna get started. Welcome everyone. This is Brian once again doing a podcast for the CFFFB League. I'm joined today by Chuck of Ball State. Chuck, if how you
Hello.
doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great. Chuck and I are gonna just kind of get us set for our auction that's coming up in approximately a week. We're going to kind of just do some reminders for people on what to expect in the auction for especially newcomers who've never done this format before or maybe never have done an auction before, what to expect. And then we'll also kind of maybe do a little bit of outlining of what we think will kind of happen in the auction this year, given that we just had the NFL draft no more than a week ago. So things are still fresh in our mind. Things will kind of likely change over time, but we just we do this every year. We kind of set the scene, and then likely after the auction, we'll have a recap of who did best, what was surprising, those types of things like we normally do. So um, very quickly, the auction starts. We have two phases of the auction every year. One is for upperclassmen transfer periods, and then the second is more of the main course, which is our rookie freshman auction period. All of that is supposed to kick off starting next week on May the 9th. Um, that will be the portion that we start our upperclassmen. It'll go by super quickly, probably be done in like a day or two, if that, maybe just a day. And then in a week's time after that, after the start of the upperclassmen, we will move into our freshman period. The reason why we kind of separate those two, is predominantly because we have some custodial work to update people's eligibility and track red shirts and stuff like that, and apply transfer dollars to people. Um, So just kind of showing the calendar. So we're gonna kick everything off 5 p.m. I think Eastern time next Friday, not this upcoming Friday, but the Friday after that, and then the 17th, which is almost a week after, will be when we start the auction. So the main thing will start off on a Saturday. Hopefully, everyone will be able to kind of spend more energy and time than when we maybe started before, which I think maybe one year we even started on a Monday, which is sometimes not ideal to get the right people paying attention. Um, Talk a little bit about the transfer auction period. Transfers are handled where any player up prior to the auction that is cut is considered a transfer for that school. Um, if they are picked up by another school during this transfer auction period, they are go to their new school and they kick back 50% of the dollars that they go for, rounding up to the nearest dollar, back to their old school. So it's kind of a rebuilding incentive structure that you can kind of gain some extra dollars moving into the freshman portion of the auction. Um, it also kind of gives teams the ability to see who's kind of going in and for all the assets at the beginning. But once that period's over, once that initial period's over, we move into the freshman piece. No longer does transfers apply. You can still pick up upperclassmen throughout the entire auction, but no longer does that 50% kickback apply. So if I don't know about you, Chuck, but the way I view the transfer period really working is that it's mostly really valuable assets, really good players are actually going to maybe get bid on. People aren't going to spend their time um, dealing with end of roster people until after they get a bunch of rookies in. I don't know if you feel the same way, but that's usually what I view this period is. This is like the blue chip transfer portal prospects that get kind of their first bid or crack at it, and then after the auction is when really anyone picks up the scraps that might be left on the heap.
Yeah, and that's a couple where I got a couple of my hopeful players last year. I got Kenneth Walker III and uh, Trevor Etienne, and one of both were kind of disappointing last year, but that's where went after, and those are the kind of prospects expected. Just another note: the last day two drop for that deadline will be on May 8th,
Hmm.
the day before we start. That way, if you do have any that drop after that, you won't be able to be eligible to get that 50% back.
Yeah, and that's just to help us keep things clear that we know and can reflect that properly in our transfer records. Um, Transfer's pretty small potatoes when it compares to the freshmen. That's when everyone really is participating. Um, like I said, that'll start on May 17th, which is a Saturday. Um, One thing I didn't mention, it's worth clarifying, or worth stating really, is the auction itself is a long form auction. You do not have to be present the entire time for the auction. It is meant that you can walk away and come back at your convenience and really not miss too much. Players generally don't fly off the board. You get a lot of runway to kind of see how the board is set and be able to make determinations. We do have, I think it's a 24-hour, or is it 12-hour? Let me double check
Is
that.
it It's 12-hour normally, but is it 24 hour for anything else?
No, it is 12 hours of
Yeah.
being the highest consecutive bid. So you have to, the way that works is you have to go 12 hours of holding the player as the highest bidding team consecutively without having that bid reset by another team for them to come off the board. Um, and the reason why we do that is, again, long form. It allows a lot of convenience. You can get your everyday life in. You could go to work for an entire 8 hours and not really miss a ton of things. Historically, most activity has been um, during really specific windows of time during the day. A lot of players come off the board overnight. The clock just keeps running overnight. There's no pause on the clock. And it just kind of allows people to jump in and out of the auction at their convenience. We know we're all busy. We know we have lives outside of this, and this helps accommodate for that. We do understand that some people also can't be patient enough to let the players come off the board and would like to see them come off quicker, but this just allows that pace to be available that really could accommodate for a multitude of different um, people and how their day-to-day lives operate. So once you get a
Yeah.
player off the board, there's usually, I think, about two two players. Oh, is it two or three? Man, I am
You
sucking at
nominate two players
remembering.
at a time. Is that what you're,
Uh huh.
or yeah, you can nominate two players at any given time, at least in our in the first part of the auction. When we get further into it, I don't know. It's usually about 90% of the funds are gone. You open it up, more people. You have unlimited nominations, but you can use that to your advantage if you want to have less people on the board. So people are spending more money on specific people, and maybe you got some folks that you want to hold off on pinning on the board, or you're kind of waiting. Or you can just go ahead and put as many names on the board as you want to. I know in minor we can have up to 40 people on the board at one time, and that could spread money quite thin. And if you have money allocated to one spot, or other people have money allocated in different spots, it'll clear up money for you to get who you want potentially.
Yeah. Those are great points. It's people use the board differently. They don't nominate all the players all the time. You don't have to nominate players you like every time either. If you've never done this before, people oftentimes throw kind of useless assets out there to hopefully soak up funds from other people or divert attention away from a player that you do really want. There is a little bit of nuance and strategy to that piece too, but we usually start out with two nominations per team. So in Power Five conferences, they'll see up to like 32 players on the board at any one time, and then like he said, minor can see or anywhere up to 40 because they have 20 teams in their auction. Just to state it, you are auctioning against your entire conference. So both divisions are in the auction together. It is also worth stating that this is a really big change for a lot of people. We have two copies of every single player in this league. So you will often see, specifically in the freshman auction, this first cycle of players that go, and then there is always a second cycle of players that go, and some people get tripped up on reminding themselves that they have that second copy available. There is some nuance to MFL. It doesn't allow us to see always that second copy being available in the pool of players, but it's mostly to do with their system, and it's not like they're trying to trick you or anything. But those things are worth reminding yourselves on. Historically, doesn't mean this applies universally, but historically, most people seem to find more value in being patient and waiting for that second copy of players. They generally come off at a cheaper price point with obvious caveats on when tiers of talent drop off or when the last player of substance is coming off the board, that they tend to get a little bit higher in some places. Or if there's just a prospect that's really, really good, the second copy might go even higher than that. I think we had a few, like a couple years ago, Bijan Robinson copies that just kind of like the second copy ballooned because people really wanted Bijan Robinson. Um, in terms of allocation of dollars, everyone has a different type of budget, which is based on how well you performed last season. Ranges between $200 and up towards of like 250 is, I think, this year's range. And you get those dollars based on generally getting wins, also getting player awards. So, like if your player wins the Heisman, you get some dollars kicked back to you. You might win Coach of the Year for a year, and you get extra money for that. You get money for players graduating, and that helps bolster, the prestige of a player doing really well and leaving your school. Maybe kicks back a few dollars that you can use to get the next recruit into your school. Um, so it is worth noting that some teams have a little bit larger war chest that they get to use those dollars on people, as well as we've mentioned transfers before, but that 50% kickback can also help teams kind of bolster their dollars to grab new recruits. So not everyone's playing on a level playing field. It is it's pretty even still, even with that disparity. There's no one guy that's going to just run away with the entire auction under their arm. So those are super worth remembering. And Chuck, I'm going to let you talk for a minute because I got to run and take care of my dog. 1 second.
Okay. So just to let you know, he did mention that there's a second player. So this is a question that we get a lot of questions about as far as when we start talking about Devi. If you do have a Devi in there and you don't win that first copy, you still will get that rebate on that second copy. So just to let you know, that second copy will have that opportunity for that rebate. Just to kind of go over some of the Devi picks. If you are new, you may be wondering, wow, I got a pretty good player on my pick. Well, the way that's done is it's based on last season's records. So the worse you did in your conference prior season, the better pick you're going to get. So if you finish dead last, you're going to get first pick. And I believe Baylor, if Lewis was here, he would be talking about how he was happy with getting his number one overall pick. Another thing to talk about, Devi, is that they're picked up in the fourth week of the NFL season. So when we start, that's when that will happen. Now, just to remember, when we're picking up players, you only have one copy of any given player.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get your Devi pick and you're like, oh, I want the other one as well, that's a no go. Another thing is when we're doing Devis, Brian will go ahead and select everybody's Devi picks and start them off as 0 on the board on the day. So that's going to be for the freshman auction. Once that starts, he'll go ahead and put that in there, and he'll let us know when we're off to the races once we start there.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. We do have Devies. I imagine you touched a little bit on the rebate piece.
I did not state the amount, but I did talk about how it's because we get a lot of questions about second copies. That the second copy will get that rebate as well.
Yeah, if you do not get the first copy, you still have that opportunity to get both. So you're the only one that has the rights to that player, and it applies to either copy. We always set the starting nominations for the freshman portion of the auction with Devi selections. So if they were in this draft class, there are Devi selections that don't declare for this year's NFL draft. They can remain as Devi selections, but they don't get nominated for obvious reasons. It's only just rookies. So if they declared for the draft and you had a player that didn't declare, you'll have a technically a free nomination to use at the start. But I'll promote any declared Devi selection that was in the they'll be your first nomination regardless. I'll set it at 0, so even if they come off the board at $0, you can immediately cut that player and free up that roster spot again, or you can just win them for $0 as well. Some of the strategy really behind Devi has been something that people have kind of tried to feel their way through. Some teams try to go really hard for the players that they acquire and almost go with a complete I got to get this guy no matter what. Some other people can go with a more measured approach that they will use. They'll set a max budget or a max dollar amount that they're willing to spend on that guy, and if he goes over, they just cut him loose or don't deal with him. That could usually go for some of these Devi guys that we'll use, like Trevor Etienne, maybe as an example this year. He kind of was a higher pick last year, but his value is not carried over from where he was as a Devi selection to the NFL draft. So he will likely be a cheaper player that'll be acquired, and I imagine we'll see a lot of teams put just a $20 bid on him, and if they get him for $20, they will get that rebate applied off, and he's essentially a free player at that point. And no one will generally bid on those type of guys because they don't want to get stuck with actually paying the dollar amount for him. So there is some nuance, there is some real strategy behind it. Some people go for the first copy and just get it out of the way. Some people wait till the second copy because then they might have a better opportunity for an even cheaper player. Noting that we mentioned that cheaper or second copies sometimes go cheaper, more often go cheaper than the first copy. But Devi's an interesting element to it. I don't think anyone's found the right mix, and it also kind of depends on teams' needs. Teams' needs change through the off season and from season to season, and some players that you picked before might not fit the profile. Or Quinn Ewers was another example of a player Devi copy that got a lot of attention prior, and a lot of teams holding on to that copy for numerous Devi cycles, and now it's not really an asset you want to hold on to. Yeah, it's kind of just tough beans. But yeah, Devi's interesting. If people have questions, feel free to ask about them. It'll kind of start on autopilot, but eventually you kind of pick up on it. If you do win your player, and the protocol really becomes like once you know that you won the player, we have to apply those rebate dollars back to you manually. It's not something that automatically happens in the system, so you need to at least tag us in the Slack channel. You can tag anyone from the committee, and they'll get in touch with me or Lewis, and we can apply the rebate amount back to the team that was had won the player. Usually, that's why we also set the players at the start, because then we can kind of keep track of those rebates much more easily than if they were to be showing up at any really random time. Most people get the first copy of their Devi selection, and so when they, after the first day and a half, with us paying really close attention to when rebates are happening, we can kind of, pick up on that cue and do it ourselves. But later in the auction, there are a few player copies that come up, and we just need to be notified, and we'll get it applied when we can. We will not front people money until they actually won the player, though. That is a question we've gotten before. So that's Devi in a nutshell.
One more thing I'd like to talk about is kind of avoid the poison pill. I speak from experience. When Lou picked Jalen Watermeyer tight end, he picked him as his Devi, and I believe it was Toledo and I were bidding him up to kind of make them pay more, try to get them over that $20 rebate. But unfortunately, I ended up winning them for like $16, so that bit me in the behind. So that might be something like if you're not really wanting the player, be cautious because you might be stuck with them.
Yep, it's another strategy I think people have slowly figured out. It's not really something that's universally applied, but it's something to be mindful of that teams that maybe did get like a Trevor Etienne or a Quinn Ewers, people might know what the limit of their rebate is, but if you set your proxy dollar amount, and maybe did we even explain proxies?
No, not yet. No.
Okay, we will do that right next. But if you set your proxy at a different level than what the rebate amount is, some teams can kind of get tripped into all of a sudden spending money on a player that's not worth that type of asset dollar amount. So it's something to be mindful of. It's not always worth the risk. Sometimes um, it's worth just letting that guy go for whatever the dollar amount is, even if it's free. It doesn't really hurt the team that's getting them, but it also means you're not necessarily getting stuck with that player for even just a few dollars, which could be important or useful. We'll go back and circle the proxies. This is a super important part, and it kind of leans into the convenience and ease of this long form auction system. We have a proxy system. So we mentioned highest bid and needing to have 12 consecutive hours. Part of that is you set a proxy max bid amount in MFL. I wish I had a screenshot of this. Maybe it's something I'd do this year. You set a proxy, so let's say you wanted to put Quinn Ewers up for $50 this year. I'm not sure max you want to spend. Anyone who bids on Quinn Ewers after that point of time will go against your proxy, and it will just automatically manage that for you until either you make an adjustment to that proxy amount or someone overbids that $50. So if Chuck bids $1 on Quinn Ewers, I technically still have the highest bid at $1 now, which is the match. But it won't change or reset the bid until Chuck bids $51 in this example. So it's worth noting that that is super important. New people, do not go wild with the proxy. It is there to allow you the flexibility to come in and out of the auction. You do not have to put a bunch of money down. Also, all the money you have is what you get. There's nothing else that's coming to help you. So if you spend $200 on a player, one player, that's
That's it.
$200 out the door, and that could be your entire budget. I strongly don't advocate for that. I typically advocate for more stringent and more tight purse, spending habits instead of going, wild with your dollars, because it can be a tough lesson. You might get one really good player, and that might be awesome, but this isn't the same thing as like a dynasty draft where you might get multiple cracks at the apple. Like you get another round of draft picks, 1, 2, 3, you're going to get a guaranteed 3 players. That doesn't always happen in an auction. If you keep your money around, or you make sure you budget it correctly, you can usually walk out with a good stable of players. But if you spend it all on one person at the very start of the auction, you are going to be sitting on the sidelines for a good portion of that auction until everyone else has spent their money and they can no longer like price you out. So be diligent, just kind of be patient. It might seem like everything's going by really quickly, but I promise you, you'll get the hang of it. Ask questions, feel your way into this. Don't put down $100 bids at the start. You can kind of do ones and twos, bids up. It's not the end of the world if you do it that way. If you ask questions, we don't try to go back and adjust bids after the fact. We really try not to do that. We've had maybe 2 or 3 instances over like 4 or 5 years of that where we've had to like change a transaction because someone did that. Usually, if you did it, you're stuck with it. And I'll be right back one more time, Chuck.
Okay. So one of the things that he mentioned was the proxy. You can change that as long as it's not under the winning bid. So in his example for when yours $50, if I came in and paid $45 on him, and let's say it's close to the end, Brian's like, it's got 5 minutes left on that timer. He can move it down to like $46, which is still would be the winning bid at that point in time, and but no, it doesn't stop anyone else from coming in and hitting $47 before that time runs out. He would lose the bid. It won't reset your timer, and you can also move that money up as well. So if someone's just keeps pinging you, and it's like you really want the player, go ahead and like if you want to add a couple more bucks, you're more than welcome to. Just know that it won't reset that timer, so you'll be good as far as what that goes to. There's no active limit on how many winning bids you can have. So the two nominations are there. However, you can be winning on 15 of them if you really wanted to. It might uh, leave your purse pretty light, but you would have that option to do that.
Yeah, the only big caveat with that is it's dependent on your roster. So if you have 30 players on your roster, you can't go and like bid on 5 more players. You only can bid what your roster space allows. And we do have a cap of 30 players for your team. That's a hard cap. You can't get over that. So that's just worth being worth remembering because it's gosh, let's see if I can get to an actual bid.
But you can cut mid auction if you have to. If there's someone on there that like maybe on the board that you really want, and maybe there's someone on your team that you really don't want, you can cut before you bid on them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So let me trying to find a good start example for our auction. So one of the things that's a benefit for I view it as a benefit. It's helpful and transparency goes a long way, I think, with making informed decisions. But we have public transactions in this league. So people who bid up players. Goodness gracious, where did I? People who bid up players.
Eh,
Let's do this.
Yeah, you can see every time someone pings you, and you can see who did it, when they did it, how much they did it for, and everything else. So if there's somebody that actively targeting you, you can find that out.
Yep. And so it's just helpful because some people get kind of bent out of shape on this action, but you get information on maybe why people are taking that action. It's all found in the transaction report in MFL. So you can see kind of what the bid amount is. You can see how frequently they're bidding on you, bidding against you, and you can kind of see who's doing the enforcement. So that way you can kind of get an idea of like, oh, this one team keeps bidding up running backs. I should be on the lookout for them in their running back market and make some more accommodations. You can also see who's kind of been price enforcing. Let's say you come in at your guys are going to come off the board here and like overnight, and you know Lewis is pretty good at doing this all the time. He'll wake up at 2 a.m. and put last second bids in. You want to make sure you have a good enough proxy when you're going to bed maybe that night, just making sure it's healthy that someone might come in overnight and try to needle like a couple more dollars out of you. That does happen, and that's just part of the reality and general strategy of some of these auctions of trying to wean the money that you might have off of your budget, and that way you can't be as much of a factor against them. Um, it's it's useful. It's informative. The other thing is, I will always say, people get upset with like bids being done at the very last second. That stuff happens. Just get used to it. You might be upset about it, but there's nothing against the rules against it. You can be upset. You can piss and moan all you want, but people are going to do it. I would just come to expect it. Until that player's off the board, I would expect the dollar amount to keep going up for bids. So I know some people get really bent out of shape and thinks it's not good conduct, but I'll just kind of like tell you to, you know, go talk to the wall because you're not going to find much sympathy from me on that. It's just the way auctioning works. Until that player's off the board, any dollar amount is set. So just make sure you have a good proxy on them because it could get reset whenever.
Yeah, that's one thing I mentioned that you can up that proxy without it resetting that timer. Because that was one thing that when I first came in here is one of the first times I've done a auction draft, especially this type of format. That was one thing I was like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that, and it could have saved me, might have allowed me to get a player that I did not get.
Yeah, and it can go both ways. So you can adjust it up and down. And the down only goes to $1 over what the current highest bid is at. So if you have Quinn Ewers again for $25, but you had a proxy of 50 originally, you can bring that proxy down, but you can only bring it down to 26. Anything over that or anything under that is not permissible in the system. You just won't be able to do it. But you could always go up from 50 if you think, oh, Chuck has been eyeing Quinn Ewers for the other draft, or I know he was bidding on the first copy of Quinn Ewers. I expect him to come sniffing around. I'm going to put a higher proxy on that. You can adjust in the middle of that. And you can set multiple proxies at once. You don't have to do one bid. Just make sure your dollars are spent. Make sure you're not hitting enter or refresh on your browser or your web page without making sure you've keeping track of what those dollars you put in the cell are. Because, like I said, you make a mistake, it's on you, and people have made mistakes. So that's kind of the auction. The auction is going to likely be over within a week. A lot of action will happen over the weekend for that freshman period, and by the middle of the week, it'll be kind of down to the $0 like walk-on portion of the auction where people are just, getting whoever they want, and the action will kind of cease, and that'll be kind of the end of our activity. So it'll be kind of roughly a 2 week surge of activity going on. People will be really active. I'm sure chat will be happening. In terms of chat, I'm generally pretty permissible to say whatever's being talked about in chat's kind of free reign. I generally think people are going to talk. People are going to gauge what's being priced in those spaces. I'm not going to control or police it that much, if at all. It's just what it is. Some of it's kind of out and navigating and fighting through the noise of what's happening. So yeah, don't be surprised if you see it, hear it, anything under the sun. So I guess with that said, we can kind of talk a little bit about strategy and some of the resources we developed. Um, I don't know what your opinion is on this draft class this year, Chuck, but it's kind of been all over the board in my opinion. I think definitely the QB portion of this year is kind of underwhelming, to be frank, compared to last year, but then even more so I think after the draft it seems even more underwhelming.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a lot of energy and interest around running backs this year. I don't know if you kind of get the same sentiment from people.
Yeah, I mean that's what the main highlight has seen to be. And it's going to be those running backs, especially like Genty and Hampton and all those guys. Looks like it's actually you've updated or it updated itself about because I noticed before there was only one 5 star. Now we got four of them, so
Yeah,
it's changed a little bit.
that's one of the things that I try to do for people. I get this format is different and unique, and there's some people really love their certain elements of college football just as a whole. So I try to create this module to help people kind of maybe understand or kind of get a viewpoint of maybe what kind of costs they could see based on historical precedent. So I have a module that we kind of use for tracking. This is what the 2025 class is. I kind of use that grading piece of stars, like we use 5-star recruits often in college football. I tried to mirror that with some rules, and then basing on what those projected costs are based on historical precedent of similarly valued guys based on Superflex ADP. So, to Chuck's point, a couple weeks ago or a month ago when we were pulling DLF data or ADP data for this projection, it was pretty much Genty or bust. Over the last month, it's changed with like Hampton, Cam Ward, Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins all like getting a big boost. And I would expect really this the whole thing would look different if I got the May ADP updated with after the draft. I'm sure
Hmm.
players like Egbuka or Shadur Sanders specifically might not be the price at the mark that they are, and they might be dropping a bit more. But yeah, I think overall, if I were to compare last year's group, I think we had like 7 5 stars, and this year I think we're down to 4. So it changes from year to year based on what people are valuing certain players are at. Um, you can get an idea of the cost if you were to like review all the players. You can see this graph on the right where it kind of is using all the different dollars that were spent. So like while this is kind of a projection curve, the general best fit line that it follows, you can see that the range for a player like Bijan went for 192 all the way down to 109 in different auctions. That's a spread of 90, almost $90. So the values change for different copies depending on how the auctions work. It's just worth noting that some people view that as wins or losses. People who get better deals generally can stretch their dollar a little further than people who overpay, but some people just want one guy and they get him and then they're really happy. So this is a tool we have. I don't know. I'll throw this question out to you, Chuck, because it seems maybe like the best place to start in this auction. How much money do you think Genty goes for? Right now, it's projected
Um,
like $110 to $111, but I have my own opinions on that.
yeah, I think it's going to go for a lot higher, especially in my conference. I think it's probably upwards up to 170, 150.
170? Okay.
Um, yeah, that's because what did Bijan go for? If you don't mind pulling those numbers, as far as and I feel like they're somewhat similar as far as profile. So he went up. It mainly just depends and everything like
So
that.
like
But and
New Mexico State in minor got Bijan for 125, and then San Jose State got him for 130. So that was even cheaper um,
yeah,
than what I
but
think
it feels
you're.
like they're. What I'm thinking.
Let's see, what did Caleb
I
go
mean,
for last year for you guys? Ohio got Caleb for 127 and
is that Florida's
155.
outlier dot at the very top there?
Yeah, that's Florida. They were a
Yeah.
new person
Okay.
last year. This is a cautionary tale. They got into the bidding
Yeah.
war and got Caleb Williams and essentially spent all their money on him, and that was the one player that they got. So please be mindful that that's maybe not what you want to do with all of your players. Um, so I think both you and I, while it's projected 110, I think that's kind of like a safe floor for Genti at this point. It seems like I would expect him to go probably 120s, 130s, maybe 140s is kind of that
Yeah.
safe middle. Um, and I expect players like Hampton, Travion Henderson, Quinshad Judkins. I don't know. It just feels like people are falling in love with that 4 sets of running back players, and I could see all of them going for around 100 too. Maybe Omari and Hampton inching closer to 120.
And it's a little deeper. This class is pretty deep as far as running backs. As you can see, that's if we're looking at the first 10, there's over half of them are running backs. So we're just if we're just looking at it, there's quite a drop off, but still, first 6 options are going to probably be pretty well sought after. I think.
Yeah. I think the one position I'm even more curious about is this QB position. Last
Hmm.
year we got a glut of quarterbacks, and a lot of people got some value out of that position with players like Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. kind of going for maybe a little more tempered prices. We also had a huge transfer market last year. That's not shaping
Hmm.
up to be the case this year. I don't think we're having nearly the level of talent that was dropped into the transfer portal as last year, and I think that's gonna maybe reverberate through what the auction does for QBs. Um, I think Shadur obviously drops like a rock after what happened to him, and I think that it's going to make Jackson Dart and probably Cam Ward even more expensive depending on the team. I don't know if you kind of getting a similar vibe from that or not.
Yeah, for those needy ones, they're definitely going. I believe are going to go up, especially since they're slated to be starters opposed to what Shador's not, and then what Gabriel got drafted to the same team, so I'm sure his value will actually go up. You would think of his where he was drafted, but you never know until we get in there.
Yeah, and QB is important. I always thump my chest to say QB is like the most important position. Teams can definitely be good without a quarterback, but I think the best teams, the really contending teams, have a really good quarterback. Like most playoff teams last year had some combination of like Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix kind of leading the charge because those guys were like the most productive in this format last year. So if finding the better quarterback seems like or Brock Purdy was another top end QB last year for people in this
Hmm.
format. Like those stable starting highly productive QBs, they don't have to be Patrick Mahomes level, but they have to be better than like Justin Fields or Trevor
Will Lewis,
Lawrence.
Lewis,
Yeah, Will Levis and those type of
Levis. That's it.
guys. Yeah, those guys aren't gonna. They can definitely start for you, but I don't think they're gonna get you to like the playoffs very consistently. You need kind of a really good higher end QB, and so some people need to stretch for that. So I suspect Cam will kind of get more attention now. I expect Jackson Dart to probably tick closer to maybe $50, $60. And Shador, I think he'll probably drop to like he's going to probably be a free rebate for maybe quite a few of these teams because he's not going to. I think teams will be kind of scared off grabbing a potentially $20 like poison pill QB if he's a fifth
Yeah,
round quarterback. Same with like Quinn Ewers. Like I think he's going to be another rebate that kind of gets set in the middle and people are going to field him because he's what a seventh round quarterback. It's just not going to fly.
yeah. Well, I got lucky when Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant. Nobody picked him up, and I was just like, I'm gonna take a shot on this guy, 'cause Mr. Irrelevant, and it turned out to be pretty good. But I mean, you get also some of those might be worth a stash if you think that maybe something can go favorably in their way, and then maybe they were going to be the starter eventually one day. But I probably wouldn't waste too much money on them if you don't know, since it's such a big question mark.
Yeah, I don't think you should be spending too much on backup quarterbacks. While QB's super
Hmm.
valuable, you gotta spend your resources wisely. And I guess we'll round out the wide receiver tight end position in this draft. This seems definitely not as good as last year's group. There's definitely a lot of interesting pieces that don't necessarily have great or clear pathways. I think the probably biggest question mark for me, not that I'm questioning his talent, I'm questioning his opportunity, is like players like
Hmm.
Travis Hunter, where you're kind of like, well, dude, if you play 80% cornerback, what are you really giving me on offense that I'm going to find value in this league? So he's going to be an interesting thing for me to see how people value him. In other leagues that have like IDP components, I mean, he's got value all day long for the most part. But here, if he doesn't get classified the right way in MFL, and if he doesn't get to play on the right side of the ball for this format, I feel like people could be sinking a lot of money into a wasted asset, which will be interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there, but if he's uh, what they say is that it's really hard to play defense. So if he's over there sucking oxygen, he's not going to be able to play offense, you know.
Hmm.
But I'm we can always hope because I do have him as one of my daddy rebates this year, which would be nice, but we have to see. I think another big chant, what was it? Loveland got on the Bears,
Hmm.
so there's some competition there. Just FYI, just keep an eye out on those tight ends. They're not. as Brian. He's not a big fan of them, but rightly so. It's because they really don't give you as many points as wide receivers do.
It's not to say that they can't. I mean, we have players like
Yeah,
Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, like give you
Brock
solid,
Bowers. Yeah,
yeah, and Bowers last year give you solid points. They're not required to start in this league. You're not required to start a tight end, so they really take a diminished hit where spending too much money on a player like that. It's you could spend it on something else and still get similar value. I think because I
yeah.
think like while there were people last year that spent so much money on Brock Bowers, there's like the inverse where people spent maybe a few dollars on like Tucker Kraft one season, and he's not nearly as good as Bowers, but he's definitely putting up points. And what you relatively spend, it seems like it's kind of a bigger win in some ways. But
What is it? Cade Alton as well with the
yeah, Kate
Bucks.
Otten. Yeah, Kate Otten was
Yeah,
another one that puts it out. The other thing is like some of these assets like Kyle Pitts or McBride, they like didn't start showing up or doing anything until like junior or senior year. So you're like kind of generally waiting for a longer payout for some of these tight ends to like hit. Um, it just makes that asset kind of tricky in this format. So just be cognizant of that. You don't have to start them. Means that sometimes, even though we say like $50 in this projection, unless they're like top of the end, I think Brock Bowers last year went for generally around 40 or 50, and I think most people would probably say that they like Brock Bowers more than Tyler Warren this year, even though people seem to love Tyler Warren too. Or actually, there's a really easy way to project to check
good
that.
check.
Yeah, Brock Bowers was at $73 last year projection. So,
Yeah, yes.
so yeah, there's definitely a difference, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I think there's not a lot of high end players this year. I think there was a lot of fanfare for McMillan, but I don't know since it's just not getting as much attention now than what was happening last year with Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think we see like the $150 wide receiver this year coming out of even if Travis Hunter was like a sure thing. So we'll see what this position kind of churns out. Other resources that we provide. So also on this module is we do kind of a grading. So like kind of similar to college football, we'll have a kind of a grading scale of what your recruit class is and kind of show who had the best recruiting class and do some just fun things. These don't really do anything of note or value. They just are kind of like this caching system and providing a fun spin on this activity. So that's just something to be aware of. And then also the transfer portal, we keep track of which transfers kind of yield which dollar amounts and how much. I do this most of a benefit for people who are questioning if they should transfer a player or not. I always advocate for this. If you're expecting a certain type of payout from a player, you should make sure they're really high end. I know in some of Lou's write ups for teams this season, he had some players that were being cut to see whatever you can get. I firmly disagree that there was any value in a lot of those players. If the player's kind of a marginal, like I might cut him because he's not really rosterable. The same kind of opinion is held by other teams that they don't view them very rosterable. You got to put kind of really high end assets that will yield some value. The other thing to remember is the more years of eligibility they have, typically they fetch a higher price because they will get more years. If you're throwing seniors out there, there's usually a much more diminished market because you're only getting that player for one more season. It doesn't always mean that always is the case. I think like last year we had some $80 quarterbacks coming out of the SEC, and it was all steered by those teams were really good, but they were missing a quarterback, so the market just kind of drove them up. Whereas inverse, we've had some really good seniors that just I think Jerry Jeudy last year didn't really field many dollars, maybe went for a couple dollars here or there, and the amount of production he put on the second half of the season was definitely worth way more than that. So it's really a gamble. Sometimes you put a really good asset out, like last year Kansas. he put out players like Jameer Gibbs and let me see if I can highlight what last year was. Put out players like Jameer Gibbs, Trevor Lawrence, Kenneth Walker, and all of them kind of came back where he got about 160 extra dollars from all those players that he transferred to help bolster a new rebuild because his team was kind of aging out on him. And had achieved a lot, but was kind of aging out on him. So the transfer market is really there for teams that are looking to cash out on a player where it doesn't fit their team's current timeline. They might have a bunch of freshmen or sophomores, and throwing that senior out there might get you more money to help build your team up even quicker for this year and beyond. Versus some teams really use it to plug some holes. Like last year when I was Wisconsin, I almost spent all my money on upperclassmen. I think I got Najee Harris, Brees Hall, and Devonta Smith. I spent, I don't know, almost close to $180, $90 or something like that. And that's because I was all in and I just needed known assets that are going to play right away. The more eligibility I had just meant a better window that I could get. So those are all something that you want to evaluate when you're trying to make these decisions. I don't know, Chuck, if you have any other opinions or thoughts on that, but this is just hopefully a tool that people can use to see what maybe the kind of market might be for valuable players.
I mean, yeah, just if you're in your window, I would, if you, and there's something in the transfer portal that you really want, go for it. I mean, I'm always, if you're going to win now, you need to put in the assets and try to go to win now. So that's one thing that we find when going through it during the season. Like, should I burn this red shirt? Are you going to win this season? You got a good shot. That's one thing I would do. So same approach to this transfer portal. If you're rebuilding, I probably wouldn't spend too much time in it. But if you are, as far as shopping, but if you're putting players in there that, like you said, high end players that you know will return the money for your team to rebuild, go for it.
Yep. We also do. I usually send this out to each conference. I do a auction summary page. This is just to kind of take. We have all this information, transfers, devies, dollar amounts. I kind of throw them into a spreadsheet that will kind of somewhat auto track. Some of it will be manual, but I try to put all this information into one spot during the auction that people can kind of follow through or see that record. So this is just something that'll be provided. This also helps me gauge when I know to open up nominations. So I'll see a spend amount for the entire league, and once it kind of like as Chuck mentioned earlier, once it kind of ticks over 90% of all the money that was that's available is spent, then I can kind of open up nominations because I know we've kind of completed what we needed to. But yeah, that'll be available for people to review and kind of check on throughout the year. The other thing is we have this write up. Chuck, Lewis, myself, and Joey all wrote these write ups that allow teams to kind of filter for their school. It gives them kind of an approach that they might have for different elements. Don't love that this is not giving me a clear view here. Let me see if I can do that. Not much better.
You want to scroll, not scroll out, but zoom out a little bit, maybe.
I don't think it's going to save me.
No,
It's just too far to the left
no,
for what my screen's set as.
I
But
got you.
there is just a set of information. We did some write ups to say, hey, what would we do as your team? And what would we prioritize moving into this auction? And it's really just to either confirm what maybe actions you thought you might be taking, or maybe it's a check against. I was thinking my team might be this, but if these guys are thinking it's different, maybe I need to rethink my approach. We also kind of talk about stuff like what type of transfer players you should maybe consider. So let's see if I can find an example. Like this is Duke's page. One of the things we note in here is that they could maybe potentially think about transferring Brock Purdy. And the reason why is They do have some QB depth already, and um, they it's not going to maybe change the outcome of their team this season, but maybe those extra dollars help them for next season. Bringing in new talent this year that they will use in subsequent years, because I think Brock Purdy will be a senior for teams like Duke. So it's just it kind of reinforces, maybe gives you some different opinions and perspectives to say, oh, I didn't think of that. Maybe I should. And so, especially new people in this league, they might find even higher value on what it means to kind of take this strategy of the league and kind of what it takes to be really good. I would also really state that one of the other best things that you could do to help prep for this is just look at what other teams are. Some teams are just really good and they look like they're leaps and bounds ahead of you. And just seeing what those teams have on their roster can maybe help inform you what it might take to get to that level. It's not like this is a league where you get to trade assets or come through a draft where you can kind of over time matriculate up to a higher level. You kind of have to fight your way to the top, make some savvy moves, sometimes get lucky, but just see kind of like what positions and what level those positions have to be at. That you see the teams that are at the top of the playoffs oftentimes have a really good quarterback. They usually have ample depth or a high end starting lineup. Teams that are bad usually don't have quarterbacks. They have inconsistent quarterbacks that aren't maybe starting all the time for their team, or they don't have enough starting lineups. They maybe spent so much of their assets in like one or two positions or one or two players, and it really stunted the rest of the roster to be able to compete. You have to remember you're dealing with teams, 100 different teams. You are also dealing with multiple copies of the same player. So the fact that you might have Jamar Chase, there might still be other teams that have Jamar Chase, and that advantage for you only goes so far compared to what other teams have. So those are just some reminders I always try to echo to people, that way they can be well informed when they're trying to make these decisions. The other last thing I'll always extend is just ask questions to people. I think it's one thing to keep your cards to your chest, but I think most of the people in this community are pretty forthcoming with what their thoughts are. If something makes sense, what they would do. I will be the first to say Lewis will tell you if your idea is stupid or if you're doing something wrong. He was not bashful about giving you that opinion. There are other people such as that, like Joey, but Joey is much more tactful and a bit more compassionate with his responses. So it there's a bunch out there. If you just put a little time into it, I think a lot of people can be prepared for what to expect going into this auction period. But with that all said, Chuck, do you have any closing remarks or reminders for people on maybe what they should do leading up to the auction?
Just do your research. Find out the guys you like the most. Like he said, reach out to those. You don't have to reach out to somebody in your own conference. You can reach out to somebody. Highly recommend even doing that. That way you have an unbiased uh, view. I've done that with Wes. I've done that with Brian. I've done that with Lou, who's actually looked at my team and did my write up. So I wanted to make sure that what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing and everything like that. Just remember another couple things to remember during the auctions. Everyone has their own bidding strategy. Sometimes it'll be like five, sometimes it'll be seven, sometimes there's a learning curve. You're not going to get it all in this first auction. I know I did not. Um, be prepared to be called out, especially by Lewis, who will see that, oh, why'd you get two of those guys?
Yeah.
You don't need two of those guys. Just it will happen, but that's okay. That's all part of the fun. So just keep good luck on recruiting. That's all I can say.
Yeah, a lot of people have fun with this. This is, I think, the best time of the year. I think it's better than the season itself. While the season's fun with all the rankings and things like that, I think the best activity is during the auction when you get to compete for these players and be kind of
Yeah.
on the recruiting trail. So enjoy it. Make sure you ask questions. Don't take it too personal. Mistakes will be made, but don't try to make mistakes. because they'll be permanent. But yeah, have fun. So with that, I appreciate your time, Chuck. Thank you as always, and
Yeah,
we
thank you.
will close it out from here.